First of all, I want to welcome you both on behalf of Sinai Temple and also on behalf of American Jewish University. It is a wonderful collaboration between the two greatest Jewish institutions in the world.
The two?
I know, yes, yes. No, you can thank me later. It's okay. I didn't.
And I will.
And I want to speak to you not only about Rabbi Lau, but for a moment, I want to tell you about an extraordinary project that he and his team have launched in Israel, because we'll talk a little bit about it, but really on this evening we're going to talk about other issues. But Rabbi Lau, who, as you may know, is one of the most recognizable rabbinic faces in the land of Israel, and is known not only through his teaching and television, but also these days through a project called 929. 929 is the number of chapters in the Tanakh, and each day, it takes 3.5 years to cycle through. He has Israelis all over the country, secular, religious, reading a chapter of Tanakh and commenting on it, with 60,000 people now involved in the discussion, poets, writers, artists, rabbis, all of them commenting on this interactive website. There are 150 or more study groups of Tanakh, and while it might seem strange to us to say he's bringing Tanakh to the land of Israel, the truth is that that's the case, because he's enabling people to encounter it as a beautiful book as well as a sacred book. And so you have Israelis who grew up with this great resistance to their own literature because of his leadership and his openness, suddenly involved in a discussion of the book that they are rediscovering as their own. One of the things that we don't rediscover as our own enough is something we talked about the other night when I had a discussion with the men's club about how Israel affects American Jewry. And I said one of the many ways in which it does is that really it's only been in the past couple of decades that the center of Torah learning and scholarship has really moved to Israel. And even though there are many wonderful universities and scholars and synagogues and so on in America and in Europe, the fact is that it has come to be again, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, and that the greatest Torah learning and many of the greatest teachers are in Israel, and we are enormously grateful and also lucky to have one among them, among us, Rabbi Benny Lau.
So when I thought about tonight's topic, who rules Israel, the rabbis or the politicians, I realized that implied in that is we're supposed to vote for the politicians. In other words, the implication is that the rabbis in Israel have too much power. But then I started thinking about it, and I thought, instead of worrying about how to get less power to the rabbis in Israel, we should have the whole session dedicated to figuring out how to give more power to rabbis here in the United States. And that has nothing to do with the fact that Rabbi Wolpe Wolpe and I discussed it, and we decided that all of you would be much better off if the rabbis made all the decisions regarding Jewish life. And then we went even further and decided that if the two of us made all of the decisions for American Jewish life, think how much better things would be. So,
please don't put yourself out. It's okay.
And then if we needed an Israeli opinion, we just call Rabbi Lau. So we're good. But then Rabbi Wolpe reminded me that, Rabbi Wolpe reminded me that you did buy tickets for a different topic, and that maybe we should focus on that. So that was what we're going to do. But before, I just wanted to call on Rabbi Lau just for a moment or two to just tell you a little bit about his background, and then we'll get into the topic.
Just like that.
Just like that. Noladeta, you were born?
Yeah. Okay, yes, I was born.
You're
Good evening.
Right.
Good evening. First of all, I'm Israeli. You can hear that immediately. I was born in Israel in '61. My mother actually was born in England, but when I grew up, me and my brother, myself, we didn't allow her to speak English at home because it was the language of the enemy, the British. So this is the reason that she learned Hebrew. And my English is still like that. And you will forgive me. I grew up in a regular religious Zionist family. Grew up in primary and high school Israeli yeshiva. And then later on, as all my friends, it was year 79 when I finished my high school, automatically I went to what they called Hesder Yeshiva, mixing the service in the army and learning in yeshiva. After a few months in the yeshiva, I felt something strangely. Believe me, the most regular and popular word that we used in the yeshiva, actually the two words, but we said it like one word, is Am Yisrael. We talk about the nation of Israel, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael. Days and nights in the yeshiva, all lessons in yeshiva, Am Yisrael and Am Yisrael. After a few months in the yeshiva, I walked around, looked, and see hundreds of students look exactly like me. And I came to my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Amital, Zichrono Livracha, and I asked him, can you lead me? Where can I find Am Yisrael? Where are they? And he argued with me, and then I decided to stop my time in the yeshiva. I left, and I went to the regular army. And for me, it was the first time that I felt I found Am Yisrael. It's not funny. I didn't understand the language of my chevre, my friends in the army. Israelis, unit, Golani. We didn't speak in the same language. My calendar was the Jewish calendar. When the first night in the army asked me, what is your birthday? I said the Hebrew date. Because I was 19 years old. I didn't know to count from January to December. I didn't know. Now, it was not just the language. It's different Hebrew, different culture. The time in the army moved me to start understand what is Am Yisrael. Now I can go further and further. I moved to the university after that. I went after my wife to live in kibbutz for 15 years, another part of Am Yisrael, returned back as a rabbi to Jerusalem. And I should say here openly that I met Dr. Wexler a few years ago in Israel, in my congregation in Katamon, Bet Knesset HaRamban. And he said to me, if you want to continue learn about Am Yisrael, you need to come and see different groups. You know nothing about Am Yisrael. He said it nicely. But I feel, and I said to Rabbi Wolpe, a real thanks that both of them host me here, because for me, it's a training. It's a learning to see something different. All my life, I'm in an Orthodox community in Israel, Hebrew speakers in Jerusalem. I'm very proud with that, but I should know that there is something different that may be different with ideology, may be different not just by language, but by culturally. But I believe that we'll find many, many things that will make us feeling much more together. So this is short biography. I didn't speak about 6 kids, about 3 grandchildren, and what else? Zeu.
So just to make it easier for Rabbi Lau, I'm going to conduct the entire interview in Hebrew, but I promise you, you will all understand. So let's start. Just a few days ago, the Israeli government... agreed. Okay, we'll try it a little bit. Okay. We're going to talk about the Western Wall. You just read about this in the newspaper, of course. So as you all know, just a few days ago, the Israeli government decided to designate a new section of what we consider to be the Western Wall to be used as what they're calling, in quotes, egalitarian and pluralistic prayer services, including the promise of government funds, that's already something, to beautify the space. And there's a law, in English we call it the Law for Holy Sites from 1981, that's going to be amended in order to accommodate that and to recognize a new reality. However, the women in the wall, you all read about the women in the wall who were always trying, they had to give up their right to pray at the traditional women's section. So the deal is that they will no longer pray in the traditional women's section, they will pray in the new section that's going to be created for pluralistic endeavor. So I'm actually going to start first with Rabbi Wolpe and then come to Rabbi Lau. Rabbi Wolpe.
Yes.
Hello.
Rabbi?
I understand you're an important, you were number one, weren't you? I was number three, but I was okay with that.
I think it was your accent that did you in.
You weren't number one every year, you know. There's that woman at Itar. She beat you out one of those years, didn't she?
One of those years.
I'm sorry, I'm off topic. All right. How important was that decision to American Jews?
So the decision was, as you know, was criticized on both sides, right? And I actually had the opportunity. Was it? Yeah, it was the day before yesterday, or was it? No, yesterday. I heard at a breakfast. I heard Sharansky talking about the decision, and he said that he really felt as though both sides were heroic because they gave up things that they never could have imagined giving up, and that their constituencies were very unhappy about their giving up. And so even though when you say, for example, we have to be clear, when we say that women of the wall can't pray at the Kotel, what it means is they can't read Torah, put on talis and tefillin, they can't pray the way they wish to pray at the Kotel. Of course they can pray at the Kotel, but they have to pray in a traditional way. And the recognition of the state, at least I think, for most American Jews, of a pluralistic minyan at the Western Wall, even though it's not the Western Wall as traditionally conceived, it's a separate platform, is an enormous, I don't even want to say a concession, it's an enormous embrace of the reality of most of the Jewish world. Not necessarily most of the traditional Jewish world, but if you take a poll of everyone in the Jewish world and say something like, do you think men and women should be sitting together at services, the vast majority of the Jewish world is going to say yes. So for the government of the State of Israel to finally say, you know what, we're going to make a space where Jews can do that, was, I think, both affirming and important. And no, it's not perfect and it's not everything, but let me tell you the classic critique of those people who only pursue perfection. William Stafford, a poet, said, when you purify the pond, the water lilies die. So we have an impure pond.
All right, so we have dead flowers. But what I wanted, but they had to give up the right, they really had to give up the struggle. I mean,
yes.
To what, this sounds a little like separate but equal to me.
It is.
You don't think that it
is absolutely, there's no way to say that the wall itself has to be, I think it would have created, I think it was impossible, let me put it that way, to ask the Haredi community to accept egalitarian worship at the Western Wall. It was literally impossible. You might want it, you might think it's just, couldn't be done. So the question was only, would the Haredi community be forced to accept a separate minyan at a separate place, and they don't want to, and there will still be protests. Believe me, this hasn't been done yet. It's just been agreed to, like other agreements that aren't necessarily done, although agreed to. And I think that it was the best that one could reasonably hope for in the real world. So yeah, it's not perfect, but.
Rabbi Lau, for the majority of Israelis, now I'm not speaking about the datim, about the religious, but for the average chiloni, average secular Israeli, how important was this decision?
I should say that the majority in Israel, even the secular, are very close to the old tradition, especially if you're born in North Africa or in the East. Your original tradition, your parents, grandparents, direct you to the tradition, what we call the Orthodox. Many secular will say that the synagogue that I'm not going is a Orthodox synagogue.
Right.
So it's true, but I think that the decision that they did, it's important. Maybe they have no other option to do, but in my eyes, it's not less than a tragedy. And I will explain, in your permission. Happened so, the chapter of this day, today, Thursday, we, in our project 9 to 9, you know, every day we continue another chapter. So today, we read chapter 8 in the first book of Kings. The prayer that King Solomon brought to the world about the temple, about the tefillah, the prayer that people will raise all over the world and will send the prayers to the place. And the beautiful picture that King Solomon raised in this tefillah is all over the world. Never mind where are you. You can be in east or west. You will send that tefillah to the same place. And they called it Tel Talpiyot, the place, you can say, the mountain that collect all needs, all prayers. Everyone sent his own tefillah to the same place. After destruction, we had the Kotel for more than 2,000 years. And we kept that. All tears, all prayers, all sent to the same place. Now, why we couldn't keep that? Because everyone thought that he is the only master in the area. In the language of the Mishnah, they said, Kula sheli. It's all mine. All mine. The Haredim said, it's all mine. Will not let anyone do anything against our tradition. Some aggressive, I should say, from other side, from not the regular liberal, but very aggressive side, extremely, try to say, no, kula sheli, it's all mine. And when you are doing such argument, the Mishnah said, kula sheli, if the argument is that you don't negotiate, but everyone thinks that all is him, you need to cut. Yachloku, said the Mishnah. And Rabbi Wolpe, this is exactly what's happened in Israel now. Yachloku, and it's tragedy. If we will not find the language to deal, how? Very simple. When I try to deal with someone, I know that the first step will be go back. Minimize yourself. Shrink yourself. Without giving place to other, you will never negotiate him. And everyone knows that. But when you are in the situation, the people the aggressive sides, don't want to do that.
Right.
It's a willings. It's the only thing that make this destruction. Try to think After so many years, we have two walls. Try to think, for example, so many people here go to the ceremony with the army in the Kotel, right? Your grandchildren, maybe your children have the zchut to be soldiers. And then we have the ceremony in the Kotel. Which one they will do that? In the old one or the new one? When the president will do event in the Memorial Day, it will be in the old Kotel or the new Kotel. What a mishigassen situation.
Yes and no, only because, look, the side, you made the two sides equal in a way, but the side that said you cannot have this at the Kotel were the Haredim. Yes, there were some on the other side, but they were a small minority. The women of the wall would have accepted this will be the time when you're allowed to pray here.
I agree with you.
But
I
they
agree, and the Haredi didn't care about the needs of the women in the Kotel. It's true. And because that, we paid now the price, because they didn't care. And when we say we need to do that, this cutting, yachloku, we understand, we agree that if I'm the prime minister and I see this situation, so I say, okay, everyone could take one piece. But when I'm going further and look to the large picture, see what will be the next step, if it will happen. Try to think, you bring a group of people to the Kotel. Which Kotel you will send them?
Oh, I know.
You know? But if the ceremony, the official ceremony, will be in the other, what you will do?
No, it becomes an issue of being second class. If you get the ceremony over at the
So
at
maybe
the annex.
Maybe you think
Remember
that the state will move everything to the new one.
I don't know.
I don't know. Look, in America, I suppose the prejudice is in favor of the idea that maybe competition will be good for them both.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think both of you are being a little naive if you think that this is, because Rabbi Wolpe, you had mentioned that you think that this was what was necessary to get the Haredim to agree on paper. But there's no such thing as the Haredim.
Right.
They represent all kinds of people, and they play rough.
Right.
And my prediction is that the first time that this gets opened, you're going to have a massive demonstration of Haredim, and it'll be very interesting to see how the government is going to react.
Handle that.
Rabbi Lau, you disagree.
I disagree. I think that the Haredim understand that there are other places, and they will not count it as a holy place. They will just say, no, let them do, to play in their yard. They will not call it a Bet Knesset. I believe so.
Why do you think the government, Rabbi Lau, why now? Why now? I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Why now? Do you have any insight into that?
I'm not a politician, but it's in this area. The pressure from America.
American Jews.
Right.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's what you meant,
was
this area.
from the people in America, the Jewish people, exactly what you said, the majority need that, and they push the prime minister, and that's all. It didn't came from Israel. It came from abroad.
Let's go on to another topic, which is always a hot-button topic for Israelis, which is how to get married in Israel. So I'm going to start again with Rabbi.
You decided to go to the easiest question.
Easy questions, right? No, I have some harder ones coming up later. Rabbi Wolpe, you and I cannot perform weddings in Israel. Well, we can perform them, they just don't count.
Right.
How you all feel about that? Does it bother you?
No. About your not being able to or my not being able to? No, I know how
empathetic you are.
Here's what I would say. There's a fundamental divide that I think we understand, that in Israel, synagogue and state are not divided. They're divided in some ways and not in others. And every time religion gets institutionally involved in politics, even apart from all its other involvements in politics, it's very fraught and very difficult. So I understand this as a problem from the point of view of Israel's spiritual health. I think that ultimately it's not good that an Israeli doesn't have those children. An Israeli has to go to Cyprus and get married in a secular way if they want to get married in anything other than a very traditional ceremony. So I don't take it as a personal affront. I don't feel like aggrieved. How come Israel doesn't think I can do a wedding there? That's not the issue. I think the issue is that ultimately it does religion more harm than good and does Judaism more harm than good to tell people, look, this is the way you have to accept it. If you don't accept it this way, then it doesn't fly.
But I think you're in a minority. I think that most American rabbis feel delegitimized.
I think that's probably true, but I feel the same way that I felt when you said that the Haredim are going to say, that's not really a Beit Knesset. If I don't lose sleep at night about someone else's evaluation of my religious status. It's okay with me. I sort of feel the way, maybe I should. He said maybe you should. I sort of feel it's like lahavdil, which means I'm giving you an example that I understand is very different. But I think about this the way Martin Buber used to think about he said the way Jews and Christians used to think about the Messiah. He said instead of arguing about it, they should agree not to argue about the Messiah until he comes. And then he said, when he comes, we should say, excuse me, have you been here before? He said, and if the Messiah is as smart as I think he is, he'll say, you know, I don't remember. And that's sort of how I feel about it. It's like when someone says to me of another faith, you're going to hell, I think as long as you treat me nicely, you can think of me what you will. Why does it matter to me what your religious opinion to me, if I feel secure in my own religiosity, shouldn't matter. So I don't feel insulted like I have to argue that they think I'm not really a rabbi.
Yeah, but the one thing you're leaving out is
the legal question is a real question.
right. But sometimes the delegitimization is accompanied also with aggressiveness.
But that's the
If you
issue.
would try
I care
to
how
do
someone,
it, then just try and see how they would respond.
Exactly. I've done actually 2 weddings in Israel, but always with an Orthodox rabbi. I could never do it alone. And yeah, I think it's a bigger issue. Yeah, I don't like it, but it's a bigger issue for Israel itself, which I think is a shame.
I think that's fair. Rabbi Lau, for secular Israelis, really it's more of an issue for secular Israelis, how much is this resented, that they have to have an Orthodox rabbi at their wedding?
It's become worse and worse in Israel because the new generation, the young Israelis, decided, many, I don't want to count, but many Israelis decided to break the game and said, we are not playing this yard anymore. If you don't give me any option, you said kacha, just like that, without any other options, I will not go to you, absolutely. I will go to Cyrus, I will go to any other place except the Rabbanut. The Rabbanut become, I should say, a place that a secular Israeli will say, no, my leg will not pass this place. And this is something that we need to deal with.
Do you know anyone in the Rabbanut personally?
No, not even one.
You should tell them. I mean, it's not completely irrelevant, no?
It can be relevant. My cousin is the chief rabbi in Israel. And
What about your uncle?
And my uncle was the chief rabbi, and I suppose that I will not be the chief rabbi anymore. But see, it's okay. It's a networking.
Well, maybe you should become the chief rabbi, and then you can abolish the chief.
I will say something about the mixing between church and state, because for you Americans, it's obvious, the separation. This is something in the DNA of your society. And when you see mixing, it's strange and it's danger, and it's why we do that in Israel. And the truth is, if you learn history of Israel, clearly you see you're talking about the Mashiach, we are talking about redemption. All Ben Gurion, for example, the secular leader, everyone around spoke about Medina Yehudi, the Jewish state. And the difference between Jewish state and state for Jewish people, it's a huge difference. But people used to say in the beginning of the state, a Jewish state. And when they try to explain what they mean, Jewish state, that build inside not just the arguments about the explanation, but the idea that we want to put kippah on the head of the Medina, of the state. And that we can show that. All the laws that mixed with the religion needs make the opposite effect in the Israeli society. I will give quickly 2 examples. You know that according to the law in Israel, you're not allowed to sell chametz in Pesach. You're not allowed, according to the law. It's the regular law in Israel. If you have a store, you're not allowed to sell bread or chametz over Pesach. Why? Because it's a Jewish state. But if you will check it carefully, you will see something unbelievable. The numbers of people who will open the store and buy, sell chametz, but more than that, people who will go and look to buy bread in Pesach, the numbers become more and more. Many young generations said, no, I will go and buy chametz. Why? Because the law. The good example is Yair Lapid. Yair Lapid wrote, before he became a member in the parliament, he wrote a column about that. He said, I grew up in a secular family. We kept Pesach. But when I saw this law, I made the decision that in my table we will eat bread. You will not teach me how to keep Pesach. The other side, the other example, in the extremely other side, Yom Kippur in Israel. Have you been once Yom Kippur in Israel? Do yourself a favor and come. You know, there are 2 days in the year that the Jewish people need to come and see. Yom Kippur and the Memorial Day before Yom HaAtzmaut. It's the 2 holy days in Israel, a real holy days. In Yom Kippur, you can stand in the central road in Tel Aviv. You will see just bicycles. Many bicycles, kids. No cars. But it's not because a law. No one did a law about Yom Kippur. It's just the citizens. It's a society. We want to have a 1 day, 25 hours, quietly. You can smell it in the air. Yom Kippur in Israel, it's unbelievable. The Memorial Day, you have the siren, and then all countries stood. It's unbelievable. This is 2 holy days. Yom Kippur, if chas v'chalila, someone will put it in a law, it will kill Yom Kippur in Israel. So this is very serious. When we are talking about marriage, Rabbi Wolpe and Rabbi Wexler is exactly the same. The negative reaction is because the law. Right. Because the law. And if we, the religious people, the Orthodox people, we want to keep the young generation with us, with the Jewish marriage, we will do a favor to the next generation and will open the market. And many will return back. Believe me, many. They don't come just because the law.
There seems to be another way they're handling it as well. When my wife Hannah and I were there in October, she had to meet with a young woman, and we didn't know what she looked like. And she said, well, I'm very pregnant. I'm 8 months pregnant, so you'll recognize me. So we sat with her. And like an idiot, I asked her in Hebrew what her maiden name was. And she wasn't computing. I said, what was your name before you were married? She said, oh, I'm not married. So that's another way of solving the problem. I also asked her what she did for a living, and she said she was a belly dancer, which I also thought was interesting. She was 8 months pregnant. I didn't know if that was a requirement for Israeli belly dance. I just didn't know. But I bet you if you looked at it that you're going to see a lot of that is true, that another way to avoid among some of the secularists is simply just not. There was a time when it was pasnisht, when you just couldn't not be married. That time is gone. So I think that's another phenomenon that you're probably seeing because of all of that. Do you see a time when civil marriage would ever be allowed in Israel?
It's a politician question, of course, what kind of a coalition we have. 4 years ago, if you remember, the situation was that the Haredim wasn't in the coalition. From many, many years, it was the first time that we had a coalition without Haredim. And everyone believed that it will make the difference with Yesh Atid, a party, with all the secular. And the Zionist movement, from side to side, from left and right, made the coalition include the religious Zionists. Yeah. And suddenly, in Israel, after half a year, you have another election, and then the coalition changed. So it's a windows of chance. If you have the right coalition, you can do that. But I think that I believe, I should say it like that, when I'm talking about new generation, I speak about Israelis, grew up in Israel, feel free, want to, the world open, the internet will let them do everything that they want. They can work here and there, and they made their own decisions. And I believe that will make the difference. People say, we will make our own decision without your orders. They say to me, to the Rabbanut. And I accept that. I think that will make the difference. It will take another half a generation.
But you can understand from the perspective of American Jews looking at it, when we're told that 80% of Israelis are Chiloni, are secular, and somehow this just keeps going on and on. Perhaps it's because they're misspeaking when they say that 80% of the Israelis are Chiloni, because out of what you've said, what we call secular really just means not exclusively Orthodox. That must include a lot of what we would call Sephardic Jews, who are very traditional, who may not have a problem with this, or a certain number of Ashkenazi Jews who, although they're not classified as Orthodox, that's fine. If they want to get married, they would want to get married by it. Because you understand why it's hard to grasp if 80%.
It's not true to say 80% secular, because the word secular means that you have no connection to the tradition. If we are talking about that, we have 5% secular. At maximum, 5%. The majority connect everyone in his own way. We have so many, about half of the Israeli population is people who grew up in North Africa or in East. They are traditional, all of them. You may say that they are secular because they will go in Shabbat to market. Maybe they will go to football game in Shabbat. Maybe they will do many things over Shabbat. But if you will check, you will see suddenly that all of them light candles in Shabbat. All of them do something differently in Shabbat. I learned something very important about that. When you say secular, you say that I took off my holy side in my life and I said, I am the man who made the decision without the voice of God. Try to think about the poem, Zachor v'shamor b'dibur echad, when we sing in Friday night, when it said about Shabbat, the Zachor, the memory, and Shamor, the obligation. We said that it's the same thing because the differences about the Ten Commandments in the different books in the Bible. But Zachor, memory, and keep the Shabbat in the way of the mitzvot, it's completely different. If I should speak about the Israeli society, I will say like that. 95% of the Jewish people are Zochrei Shabbat. They have Shabbat in their mind. They do something for Shabbat. They will not let Shabbat come in without candle, without wine, without a nice meal. This is Zocher. I remember that it's Shabbat. For me, it's not secular. Secular means that he cut both sides, Shamor and Zachor. Few, just few people we have, but just few people who said, I'm totally out of the game. So they are part of the family of Zochei Shabbat.
Right, but that may explain to a certain extent why some of the changes and some of the power of the Rabbanut, which we would think, why haven't they gotten rid of? They haven't gotten rid of because the optics may be incorrect when you talk about 80%. And it may have to do with language, because when you say Chiloni in Hebrew, we tend to translate it as secular, but really it's not an accurate translation, because Chiloni is an identity in Israel in a different kind of way. Mm-hmm. You can be Chiloni and you go on Yom Kippur and you go on Rosh Hashanah and you go occasionally on Shabbat. You just don't keep the whole Tariag Mitzvot, the whole 613. So you wouldn't call yourself, you wouldn't claim yourself to be Orthodox, so you'd be in the Chiloni camp. But I understand what you're saying. It's much more complicated, the range of connection that people have to tradition. I want to go on to another topic, and that's the one of conversion. I'm going to go back to Rabbi Wolpe. I know what you're going to say, but
I'm hurt. I'm
okay.
deeply hurt.
I can see. I know. Well, I'll do it in a way that I'm sure will hurt you much more. If I perform a conversion and I'm involved in a conversion,
Yes.
and the person that you're not involved, I did it, and the person goes to Israel and it's not, and my conversion is not going to be recognized, isn't that going to hurt you a lot? Isn't that going to hurt you?
So I do feel differently about this than about the wedding issue. And the reason I feel differently is because it affects the person who comes to me for conversion. The wedding, I can say to them, look, I can't do your wedding in Israel. I can do your wedding elsewhere. Someone else can do your wedding in Israel. That's one thing. But if somebody goes through a whole conversion process and you say to them, listen, as a rabbi, I want you to know with the other two rabbis here who constitute a Beit Din, that is a rabbinic court, and we say, now you're a Jew, and they go to Israel and they told you're not a Jew, that is more personally offensive. The problem is, and I want to try to present the Orthodox case to you for a second. The problem is this. Every club has rules to get admitted. So does Judaism. Whatever kind of Jew you are, there are certain things you think are a minimum standard in order to call someone a Jew, right? And it's no different than saying, what about somebody who speaks English and knows American history? Why can't they just be a citizen? And the answer is there's a certain procedure you have to go through to be considered a citizen, because America, like everything else, has standard procedures. I understand when someone says, look, this is the procedure that I believe is the minimum basic requirement. I really do understand. So it's not as though I'm entirely unsympathetic to the idea that someone could say, the conversion, the way you do it, or this rabbi does it, or this rabbi does it, doesn't meet a minimum standard. What I think is objectionable is the idea that it's the rabbi who does it as opposed to the way it's done. And if the Jewish world would say, altogether, okay, you got to do these things, and then we will accept it, I think it would be a huge step forward that I don't expect to see anytime soon.
Rabbi Lau, wasn't there an attempt to do something like that,
Yes,
to create
exactly.
There was, yeah.
Okay,
You know that it's happened in the army.
Yeah.
If you know we should say, give the credit to our friend Elazar Stern. He was the one who ran that when he was in the army. And I was a Dayan in this Beit Din. It was very special Beit Din. Take soldiers that, you know, that we have 100,000 citizens in Israel who came from, especially from Russia, with the self-identity as a Jews, and then suddenly they understand they're not, because the father was a Jew, but not the mother. We have so many like that. And Stern decided to do the whole program in the army. Then, with all, you know, argument in Israel, the solution with Yaakov Ne'eman was the minister in that time. They made a special committee, collect together, it's unbelievable, it's a miracle, Reform, conservative, and Orthodox rabbis sitting together and write together the curriculum. And the student, exactly what you said, the student knew exactly what the expectations are. And that was b'shalom. It was in peace and nice. And from few years, it's run nicely, that everyone accept this giyur because it was officially under the umbrella of the chief rabbi of the army. Now, like in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox start fighting against that. It's come to the court. It's come to the Supreme Court. And we are still in that situation that we fight to keep this Batei Din. We can do that. We have the keys. We know how to do that. We know how to share people, and we know that we have no other option. We have so many people. Forget about the feelings if I accept the giyur that you did. First of all, about your immediate clients.
Right.
I have citizens in Israel. Try to think about the situation. What are they? They are Christians. They're Muslims. They grew up in Israel. They speak Hebrew, serve in the army. Of course, they married inside the Jewish society. And then when they come to marry, someone will tell them, I'm sorry, you are not Jew.
Right.
This is my problem. And we need to fight about that. About accept all giyurim around, I agree with you. If we will have standard, that's all. We need that. And we need to believe, the tragedy is that if you feel weak, so you close yourself and you close the door and you build an ark and say, flood outside, I'm survive myself. That's what happened to the Haredi area. And you should, I'm talking as an Orthodox Jew. You need to make a decision, who is your model? Avraham Avinu or Noach? If you are a weak, you close yourself like Noach and say, I am a tzaddik. I am keep myself, survive myself and my family, and the flood will do what it needs to do. But if we believe that we follow the steps of Abraham, so Abraham, try to think about all your memories about Abraham. Never kept himself. Always, ונברכו בך כל משפחות אדמה, go and help others. I believe that we know where we are. But maybe the Haredim decide to be Bnei Noach. It's interesting.
But when we talk about some kind of standard that we can all accept, the Orthodox standard generally is either you're going to accept Taryag mitzvot, you're going to accept 613 commandments, or we're not going to convert you. Now let's assume they move a little bit.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
This is completely against the Torah.
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. The Torah.
No, the idea of keeping all Torah in the path of conversion, it's completely new.
No, I get it, but just to continue the point. So there are certainly many rabbis who would say, exactly as you're saying, that this idea of al taryag, every 613 is not intended, but there's got to be some kind of bottom line. Can you, as an Orthodox rabbi, ever imagine being on a Beit Din and agreeing to the conversion of someone that you knew was not going to keep Shabbat? And I don't mean Shabbat in, let's say, in a public way. Someone who is going to drive on Shabbat, someone who's going to do things in public on Shabbat, someone who maybe they'll say, I'll keep kasher at home, but I'm not going to eat. Can you ever see a time when an Orthodox rabbi...
I will show with you a story.
All right.
It's a story many years ago. I think that it's take me back 15 years ago. I'm not so old, but 15 years old. I was in my first steps as a rabbi, and I was part of the Beit Din of conversion. And if you know, when you adopted babies, part of the adoption is convert. If you, of course, you take him from somewhere, you want to collect him to the club, so you convert the baby. Now, how we convert babies? Via the parents. You take the parents, usually the mother, and she go to the mikveh with the baby. It's beautiful situation that the mother bring him to the world like birth. Now, one regular day, it was the day of babies. It's called Giyur Ktinim of kids. I went, during the day, I went out to the hall, and I saw in the waiting room, I saw a couple with a nice baby, and I thought that I know these women. I learned, but she got it earlier than me, and she said, Benny? She pointed me, and Benny? And I watched her and say, Anat. We grew up together in Ramat Gan, near Tel Aviv. It was a small neighborhood, mixing religious, secular, a regular neighborhood in Ramat Gan. Very few family actually religious. The majority secular, but secular exactly what I said, that in Yom Kippur her father came to Bet Knesset. In Yortzeit he came to say Kaddish. In Sukkot they came to our Sukkah to have just to experience. Neighbors, we played together. Then, as I told you, I left. I go to yeshiva, another, and I moved. So I didn't see her for more than 20 years. And I know that she came from what we called secular family. Now she came with a baby to the Bet Din. I understand what she is doing there. So she watched me and said, Benny, מה אתה עושה כאן? What are you doing here? And I point the room of the Dayanim and say, I'm one of the Dayanim. She opened her eyes, beautiful eyes, and she started crying. But when someone cries from his heart, it took few minutes. And the end, she said, Benny, for days and nights, I couldn't sleep. I just thought about the situation that I will go to the Dayanim and I need to lie to say that I am Shomeret Shabbat. And I train myself to say that, but I'm not a liar. And then, you are the Dayan, you know me, I'm not Shomeret Shabbat.
That's Shabbos observant.
She went in, and I explained my colleagues, who are this family, beautiful family. I know her parents, grandparents, all secular. So connected to Jewish life. Of course, we accept her not because she was my neighbor, because she's my client. And the good situation was that I came to the bar mitzvah later. And it's a regular story. It's not a miracle. This is the regular. The miracle is that rabbi live in a regular neighborhood. Right. This is the miracle. You know that in Israel it's become very not regular thing, that we live in ghettos, everyone in his own ghetto. So maybe this is part of the solution, that we will live together and then we understand that we are closer more than we think.
At a conference that I attended a couple of summers ago, this was the topic of one of the panels. It's the one that you participate in Tel Chai and Kfar Blum, that they have every summer. And one of the panels was called Ha'av Yehudi Va'em 16, which I misunderstood. It actually means the father is Jewish, and the M16. They have the gun. I guess it's called an M16. I thought it was the mother was 16 years old. I don't understand the translation, but one of the fellows there, and I wish I remembered his name because I'm sure you know him. He's a professor at Hebrew University. He said that a lot of
Cohen.
it may have been Asher Cohen, yeah.
This
You know
is
what I'm
his
going to
trick.
Anyway, so what he said was that some of this may be moot, and he told a story about a Russian man who worked with him at Hebrew University, but this man wasn't half a Jew, he wasn't a quarter of a Jew, he was in no way a Jew. He came because of Ichud Mishpachot, family
Unity, togetherness,
unification. Yeah.
unification.
Thank you for the...
Sure, you're welcome.
Good. So here you have a totally Russian man married to a totally Russian woman whose sister happened to be married to a Jew, so they could come. And now it's Hanukkah. And his children go to a secular Israeli school. So he comes to Dr. Cohen, and he says to him, so what's with this Hanukkah thing? There's this thing you buy, and they're teaching my daughter, I think it's called a menorah. I said, no, it's called a Chanukiah. He says, well, I want to get one. So now Dr. Cohen's feeling a little uncomfortable. So why do you want to get one? Well, my daughter's learning about it, but you're not Jewish. I don't care. My daughter's learning about it in the school I want it. So they go and they buy a Chanukiah, and he says, and you put candles in it, and then he's not foolish. He says, do you recite anything when you light the candles? So now Dr. Cohen, who's Orthodox, is feeling even more uncomfortable, and he's saying, well, there's a bracha that you say. He said, well, tell me it. He said, but you're not Jewish. He said, no, tell me it. And then he turned to us in the audience and he said, this is the future of a large number of people who will not be converted, but they will become Jews by culture, because they're going to go and learn about Hanukkah, and the daughter is going to want to have a Chanukiah and candles, and she's going to want to say the Brachot, and then it's going to be Purim, and she's going to dress up, and she's going to hear the Megillah, and then there's going to be Lag BaOmer, and she's going to go to a Medurah, to a big fire.
Campfire.
You know, better to convert after Pesach, not before.
All right. But you understand what I'm saying. I mean, is this a phenomenon? And I thought as an American Jew, and I'm sure you'll understand this, you know, we live our whole lives here worried that many of us who grew up, that we were going to be pushed into doing things that weren't Jewish. I went to Fairfax High School, it was 98% Jewish, and in the winter program, there were 9 Christmas songs and 1 Verstunkene Gradel song. That was it. And most of the kids there were Holocaust survivors, but it didn't occur to us to do it. But you understand the thing, because we grew up with the sense of this culture was being pushed on us. And it never occurred to us that when you're the majority, when the Jews are the majority, the opposite is going to happen, and that all of a sudden, they're going to be the ones to assimilate. What do you think about this? Is it...
I think that it's a question of majority, and if I'm learning history, it's so interesting. The last time in the history that the Jewish people was the majority was in the Temple days.
Yeah.
And how they collect people in the Temple days? Just like that,
Yeah.
culturally. The way halachically that we started when we become minority. Then we built the system of what we say the club.
Yeah.
Because if you are a very specific club, you have your own, klalim, your rules. But if you are the state, you are the majority. So if you want to be a citizen in my majority, it's include the curriculum of schools. Mm-hmm. It's include the calendar. Every kid will keep the same calendar, and in the majority, in the Jewish state, as I said before, the Hebrew calendar is the main calendar. And Shabbat is the regular Shabbat. And every kid will have Kiddush in kindergarten just because he is part of the majority. That's all. A friend of mine have a factory in North Galil, a big factory, and he built a new building, and he asked a Chabad member to come and put mezuzot. Regular, about 30 mezuzot. So they did a big event, and he, what you say, Chiloni lemehadrin, secular 3 generations back, my friend. And the day came to celebrate the new building, and the Chabadnik came, and the manager said to the Chabadnik, Now I want to make the kavod, the honor, to the Ovdim Mitzteinim, the
outstanding workers.
outstanding workers. Of every section, I will collect one, and they will put the mezuzah in each section. Beautiful. So he called the first, second, third, and then he called, Alex, please come and put the mezuzah. And Alex said, you just look at the situation. Alex, the manager, and the Chabadnik. So Alex said quietly to the manager, but I'm not a Jew. So Chabadnik opened his eyes, and my friend, the manager, said to him, Alex, you are part of us. אתה אחד משלנו. You are part of us. Mean, my friend, the pure secular friend, become the rabbi, and he converted him immediately and said, it's funny, but it's so serious. אתה אחד משלנו. And you understand that Alex served in the army. Alex worked in Israel. He speak, of course, Hebrew. His kids grew up in Israel. He's Israeli. His identity is Israeli. And the manager said to him, אתה אחד משלנו, you are super, and I want you to put the mezuzah. Now, it will take a generation, maybe 2 generations, but so far when Medinat Israel, the state of Israel, will keep the majority of the Jewish people, it will be like that. A giyur, conversion of culture. And I believe that the Rabbanut will come later. I believe so.
Sure. Now, before we go on to our last topic, I understand that you were given cards. And so those of you who would like to write questions on the cards, now is the time to do it. And please pass them to the aisles.
I think of you all as members of Sinai Temple, by the way. Culturally, you've been absorbed into the greater collective. I just want you to know that. Without paying,
as long as you
not
don't
paying
send
a penny
membership
yet
bills,
is what you meant.
Okay. All right. I want for our...
I do want to say, by the way, even though this is not a fundraising evening, that if you want to know more about the 929 project, which is a truly wonderful project, Abigail, there you are. Why don't you raise your hand? That's Rabbi Lau's assistant, standing in the back, and she can tell you more about it and ways in which you can help promote it in Israel.
And the possibility of maybe eventually having it translated into English for American consumption as well.
Which would be one day, hopefully, we will be able to do the same thing, maybe soon, for American Jews to have the same opportunity to comment on the Tanakh that Israeli Jews have, which would be beautiful.
So the last formal topic is a dark one, but it speaks very much to the issue of rabbinic power in Israel. And I want to talk about the West Bank rabbis. You know, and this is primarily, of course, to Rabbi Lau, that there is a perception among Americans, it's in the Israeli press as well, that there are certain West Bank rabbis that are guilty of what in Hebrew you would call hasata, incitement of their talmidim, of their students, that lead to acts of violence against Arabs in the West Bank. And we can even talk about the assassination of Rabin. I don't want to get to that extreme. But first of all, let me just ask you, how much of a hold do these West Bank rabbis have over their students? What's the dynamic? We're not that familiar with that. That's not something that exists here. We rabbis can tell people to do things and nothing generally happens. So I'm curious about, I want to learn from this phenomenon, for positive reasons, not for negative, of course.
I must tell you that we are just finished the half year after the Jewish terror in Duma, in the village Duma. It's just now, it's half a year after that. I must tell you, the majority, I mean the majority, more than 90% of rabbis, never mind what kind of rabbis, where they are living, what villages, what is the settlement, will call this act terror, a Jewish terror. It's true, There are few who refuse to speak about Jewish terror. And this is terrible. We need to do that. We need to stand strongly because of our values, Jewish values. And we need to believe, and I'm speaking now as a learning Torah, that if we will not keep these values about keeping the life of people, of human being, never mind what kind of human being, we will miss our, we should say, the right to live in Eretz Israel. If I believe what's written in the Torah, if I believe that God gave me the Torah, and I believe the voice of prophets who spoke about that, they put it so clear that the right to live in Eretz Israel to the Jewish people, it comes with condition about the behavior of the Jewish people. And if we will not keep the life of the minorities exactly the same like keeping our own, we lost the right to live there. This, for me, it's clear and it's so dangerous because I am strongly Zionist. I believe that the Jewish people, need to keep the life in Eretz Israel. I'm second generation. My father came from Buchenwald to Eretz Israel. And I don't want to cut this route because murders. I think that we need to understand the danger situation about that. And about your question, there are terrible young murders. Jewish boys who lost their minds, live in who knows where. They doesn't care about rabbis. They doesn't care about parents. They doesn't care about anyone. Call them Noar Gvaot, the youth who live in the hills. Like no one controlled them. Thanks God, the police found few of them. And we hope that they will find all of them. And we need to be strong, all rabbis, all kinds together, and said, yes, there is a Jewish terror, and no different between Arab terror and Jewish terror, no different. Lo tirtzach, the comment that written in Aseret HaDibrot, it's without any condition. Lo tirtzach means you're not allowed to murder, point, without explanations. And this is so serious. And I believe that we understand that. Always we have extremely people in all around, and we need to control them with a democracy way, with the police, with the army, and to keep our zchut, the right to live in Eretz Israel.
Okay.
I did receive a question that I wanted to make sure that you were asked. You've written many wonderful books, and several of them are translated into English. Books on the sages, books on the prophets. Would you say a word about the books that you've
I will say
written?
about the English version that it's the first time when I saw the first volume, I said, wow, a book that I wrote and I can't read. There are two series. One called The Sages. So far there are 4 volumes. I took the messages from the time of the Mishnah days and Second Temple days and Talmud days. I took the figures, the biography of the sages, and I put the words, the whole idea that they brought to the world, I put the messages to the context, contain text and context together. if you all learn Pirkei Avot, okay, all the ideas, beautiful sentences that we code together, put it according to the history, where and when this scholar lived and why he said what he said. I did it with the history, with the politician around. That Syria is, thanks God, very popular in Israel, secular and religious together. And then I took another Syria with the prophets. Prophets, it's differently because I believe that we, all Jewish people, specifically the Israelis, need to listen carefully to this voice just because of what I said before. Because I believe that they talk with us and for us. They lead us how we're supposed to live in a society that we will be the majority. Rabbi Wolpe, this is something so important for us to learn about American rabbis. Because you are here, America, you are the empire. And you know the dilemma with minorities. And we in Israel, we just start to be a state, less than 70 years. And to be majority, this is something that we, the Jewish people, need to learn. We have no experience. It's completely new. Many things we do, the Jewish people, because we know how the minorities do, our grandparents. Right. And we learn that gum with the voice of prophets.
I have two quick questions I want to ask you, and then I know we're coming to the end. We're glad to have you as a guest in our shul, Rabbi Lau. How would your congregation react if Rabbi Wolpe or Rabbi Wexler came to speak at your shul?
In Hebrew.
Vadai.
I'm ready.
In my shul, we invite truly everyone. It's an Orthodox shul. Every Yom Kippur, when you will come to Yom Kippur with the silent around, every Yom Kippur in the evening, you know, the tefillah ends very early. And then we have an empty evening because everything closed and everyone is a part of the experience and don't know what to do. So in Ramban synagogue, in Yom Kippur evening, we collect hundreds of people, just open gates and yard, hundreds of people, and every year I invite a person, not a religious, man or woman, from well-known name in Israel, can be a journalist, can be a politician, can be a rabbi from other keilot, conservative, reform, stood in the podium and share the feelings about Yom Kippur. This is a message that we do in Ramban. We want to understand when we declare the opening sentence of Yom Kippur, we want to say we are together. It's a day of gathering. And to do that, we put on the podium someone from different fields to stand and share his feelings. So you're more than welcome.
Well,
Go ahead.
I would come on Yom Kippur, but what are you serving?
Is there a difference between Jews who want Israel to be governed by Jewish law and Muslims who want Sharia law as the legal system of their countries? Is there a difference, yesh hevdel, between the Jews who want halakha to be instituted as the law of Israel and Muslims who would want Sharia in their countries?
Are there Jews like that who would want to?
I know very little about the ambitions of the Muslims about that, so I'm not allowed to speak about that. About the Jewish, there are differences. There are some extreme Jewish people that want to change Israel, and thanks God there are very few. And the majority want to between a secular and tradition country. I don't think that the massive numbers of the religious Orthodox people want to change Israel to be not democracy. I think the democracy, it's obvious. In addition, they want to culturally, they want something that to feel that it's a place of the majority, the Jewish people as the majority.
As a last question, before we thank the people who made this evening possible, which I also want to do, For people here who don't know Israel very well, who haven't been there over and over again, what do you want to tell them about Israel that they don't know?
Wow. For my grandchildren, Israel is uvda, it's a fact. For many years, we thought that Israel it's in a question mark. It's not. The kids, the youth in Israel feel secure. They feel at home, even in a very problematic days. They feel very strong and secure. And they feel at home in many aspects. And the relationship between sectors are much, much better than what we hear in the news. This is not just, illusion. It's a fact.
From our point of view, I want to thank our program director, Rebecca Small, as well as Rachel Sontag-Bloom and Jamie Berman, all of whom helped make this possible, and from the AJU.
Yes, I'd like to thank Judy Feldman, who made the program possible from our end. And it took, as Rabbi Lau alluded to, it took a little doing to convince him that his visits to Los Angeles should not just be on Pico, that there are other parts. And so I hope you'll join me in expressing our appreciation and encouragement that he comes back again.
Thank you very much, and good night.